I've tried to figure out how could we take the moral high ground but not shirk our responsibilities. So I think a reasonable strategy would be to actually indict these people for the crimes that they've committed, to actually hire the most ethical, honest prosecutors that we can find, or lawyers that would serve as a special prosecutor, to conduct trials, to present evidence, to put people under oath and have testimony. I mean, I would like to see Cassidy Hutchinson under oath in a trial where she could face imprisonment if she didn't come clean. Ditto for Liz Cheney. Ditto for Adam Kinzinger. I mean, just go down the list. Then let's have a jury of their peers evaluate, weigh the evidence, and render a verdict. Then President Trump would be in a position to say, okay, all I wanted really was the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. They have been sentenced, they've been tried, they've been sentenced, or they've been acquitted. Hey, maybe you and I are just wrong. Maybe we are living some kind of an alternate reality. I don't think so. I know not, but I'm just saying. That's what our American juris system allows for, is the possibility of a different explanation. But let's get it all out. Let's get the truth. Let's have finality. And then let President Trump come behind and pardon them. Maybe conditional on their performing community service or doing something that requires them to atone for their intentional violations of the law, not only of man, but of God. You know, you're just not supposed to bring into someone's life the kind of havoc and just sheer wrongness that these people have occasioned. And I am just unwilling to allow them to walk away quietly into the night like we allowed Hillary Clinton to do when she admittedly destroyed evidence, smashed hard drives, cleansed hard drives, had a private email server which violated the federal law. No consequence, not even any public humiliation, really. I mean, it cost her the White House, thankfully. But we've got to have truth in this country. And I am saying, I got another idea for you. And this is a wild one, I know it. What was the word that our guest used? Is it an Omicron principle or an Omicron something? I may not have it right. But the idea is that you come out with this most outlandish idea that you could possibly think of, and then it gets massaged and it gets tweaked and it gets talked about, and then all of a sudden, whoa, it becomes reality. You know what I'm talking about, Jeff? You're a brain. If I've given you enough information.
No. The term you're thinking of isn't coming to mind. But I'm glad that you.
I'm glad you
asked it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I'm glad you given the opportunity to clarify, sort of qualify what I said. There's a particular reason why I chose this bar example and ethics as to Liz Cheney, right? I'm not going to wind up at any conceivable point in the D.C. bar disciplinary, processing operation, right? So I do think that she should face consequences there, Liz Cheney, that is, and potentially others who are D.C. barred. And, I can say that as a private citizen, and, there's no concern related to it, right? But what I cannot say, and would not, be wise if I, do wind up at some point back at the Justice Department, I can't promise to prosecute any particular person, right? I can't prejudge that. There's a process for that internally. There's an investigative process. I think that the investigative process should be turned on, but I can't prejudge the outcome of it. And But on the other hand, I do think, and this don't pose any sort of ethical issues of prejudgment, because I'm not ever going to be involved in the enforcement apparatus at the D.C. bar. Well, I can say that I think that Liz Cheney should face consequences for that based on my knowledge. And I urge your listeners and John's listeners to go watch Tucker Carlson's interview with Stefan Pasatino a couple weeks back.
I can't wait. I will definitely tune in. Let me finish my thought. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
then I want to finish my thought.
Quickly, before you finish your thoughts, just super quickly to tell people, what did Cassidy Hutchinson lie about in relation to me? She testified to the January 6th committee that I was at the White House all of the time in 2020, in and around the election, strategizing with Rudy Giuliani, in the White House. And this is curious and a complete lie because to this day, John, I have never met Rudy Giuliani. I have never directly communicated to Rudy Giuliani. My lawyers have talked to his lawyers, but that's, not, that was like post all the attacks coming against us. It wasn't occurring like back at the time of the election or while the Trump administration was in office. I've never talked to him on the phone. And, that story conveniently died. Politico tried to make something of it. But when we pointed out to them that both Rudy Giuliani and I say that we've never met each other and there's no evidence we ever had, and the White House logs would reveal that I was not over there meeting with him, they just, quietly ignored the fact that it was clear that she had lied about that. So that's the kind of person we're talking about in terms of Cassidy Hutchinson. And, I do think there need to be consequences for that in terms of her being investigated, and then for Liz Cheney in terms of her bar license, in connection with D.C.
100%. You and I are on the same page. The concept that I was trying to remember, thanks to my unofficial, unpaid associate producer, Gene, it's called the Overton window. And my Overton window is that through some mechanism, we grant immunity and forgiveness to every member of Congress, every potential whistleblower who has done something that they're embarrassed of, as long as it's not a crime against humanity where they've actually injured someone in a very physical or material fashion. But if somebody has been caught in compromising situations, or they have succumbed to taking money or something of value that they shouldn't have, but we give a one-time forgiveness and we let it all out, Jeff. I've got people in the media that I do trust, that I do believe in, who have told me that there is so much corruption and that so many members of Congress have been compromised because they've made errors in judgment at some point in time. Maybe they're on Epstein's video. Maybe they went to a freak out with P. Diddy, or just come up with whatever scenario you can imagine. But the deep state in this country, I fervently believe, is real. I believe it is a cancer on our nation that has to be eradicated and cut out, surgically removed. And unless we free the people with a conscience up to tell the truth and to get it all out, burn it all down, just one time, have a cleansing in America. Yeah, the CIA killed Kennedy. Yeah, the deep state committed atrocities that we didn't know about, but now that we're aware of it, and get this country back to a moral high ground. Humanity demands it. The future of the world demands it. We've got to reclaim our place in the global hierarchy where we are the moral leader. And until we have a cleansing, and until we have an admission of the sins, and we get the truth, I don't think we'll ever get there. And what happens is that we allow people who enter government, who swear an oath, to violate the law and there's no consequences. So what happens? They continue to repeat it. And it just is a vicious cycle that will never end. And I don't believe it will ever end until we come up with some means of allowing the truth to come out without destroying the people that we're asking to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculous.
So Overton window. I mean, I do think that as more and more information about the deep state, which I also believe is real, and let me then define some terminology in a second. That people get to see the things that they thought were conspiracy theories are actually not, right? And that does move the window of kind of what is permissible to debate and what people have, permission, as a kind of public matter, right, in terms of not being regarded as on the fringe if they start talking about. So it is important when the data is there and the information is there to move that Overton window. And that's, one big role Congress can play through holding hearings and the like, or setting up investigatory commissions. And so that can also be done in the executive branch. I would say that, so here, first on the terminology, here's how I distinguish between the deep state and the administrative state, which sometimes are used synonymously, but which I think are worth keeping separate. So I think of the deep state as the intelligence community plus a set of supporting NGOs and, these kinds of things that George Soros and his people refer to as, civil society. And so it is not purely governmental. It is governmental, it's media, it's NGOs that are advocacy groups and things like that, and they all work together. And the work of Mike Benz, I think, is in agreement with my personal take on these things from decades and decades of being in Washington, D.C., inside the belly of the swamp, and then inside the Justice Department, where you get to see, as a bird's eye view, a lot of what happens in other departments and agencies as well. This national security state really began to metastasize and be formulated as part of the post-World War II era. And, under the Truman administration, there's a great book about this called National Security and Double Government I would recommend that people read, which talks about how we have a formal and facial Madisonian constitutional system of government, but ever since the Truman administration and the creation of all these secret orders in the NSA, et cetera, we actually have a kind of national security state as a real source of government power behind that. And then the administrative state is all of the bureaucrats who are, essentially a fourth branch of government in the way, really going back in origins to the progressive era, people like Woodrow Wilson, and then how law schools were taken over and started to re-educate people and destroy the Constitution and classical American law and common law and English common law in the minds of modern law students, starting about a century ago. So that's how I distinguish between the two of them, and they work hand in glove with each other, but it's worth distinguishing them because not everyone who's a member of the administrative state has anything to do with the deep state. They might be sympathetic to it because it is largely dominated by the Democrats, but not exclusively. When we talk about the Uniparty, we're talking about Republicans who are part of that too. But there is one aspect that I think that, look, if you look at executive pardon history, you have big presidents in history like Washington, like Lincoln, who would pardon and give amnesty, to broad swaths of people, even after great national turmoil, right? Like rebellions that threatened the very foundations of the nascent republic, back in the 18th century from George Washington, and then in the middle of the 19th century from Lincoln after the convulsive Civil War. So, you can do something like you're suggesting executively, and then also you can, Congress can do it. And, there could be some kind of reconciliation commission, that you could advocate for, since this is your idea, with, the new Congress that's coming in. And I do think, if that were done, even if it was done in a kind of, less sweeping way that the extent to which it would be done at all, could be helpful. I think the one thing I would say that I would never personally possibly support is considering giving any form of amnesty to someone who is involved in harming children and sexually abusing children. I think that is
well. I was very
offense.
clear that I said
Yeah.
unless they had committed a crime against a person that is in a material way harmful. I think a crime
Okay.
against a child is the worst crime that
Yes.
anyone could ever commit. It is unpardonable. But child trafficking, there is an undercurrent in this country right now, and you can hear little murmurs all throughout about child trafficking. There are 300,000 children that have crossed our southern border. I believe that's the right number. Correct me if you know otherwise. That have gone missing. They're unaccounted for. Children. And the belief is that a large number of those have been co-opted and are engaged in being used in child trafficking. I cannot think of a worse thing that a nation could permit than that very thing. And so how far does it go? How broad and how wide is it? I don't know. But I think we need to find out. The things I'm interested in also, Jeff, are who is Ray Epps? Whose payroll was he on January the 6th, 2021? Call him before the Judiciary Committee, subpoena his bank records, and find out where the money came from. It's not complicated. Did anyone order that cop to shoot Ashley Babbitt? I don't think that she was targeted. But did anyone say if anyone crossed through that window, then use lethal force? It would be a violation of the law. She was 5'3", 5'4". She wasn't armed. She was a threat to no one. She had been in the United States military. She was actually trying to calm the crowd. Somehow she was lifted up to that window, and I don't know whether she was intentionally trying to get through the window or not. Regardless, it doesn't matter. There were 10 goons on the other side of that door that were armed, that were policemen, that were 3 and 4 times her size. Just put her to the ground, put her in handcuffs, and arrest her for trespassing. But nowhere does it say the violation of trespass in the nation's capital or anywhere else should be death. Yet that cop shot her and killed her in cold blood. I'm not talking about conspiracies. I'm talking about things we can see with our very eyes. And I'm not advocating that we engage in conspiracy theories, but you do recognize that's a big manipulation to get us to keep our mouth shut and not look there,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about conspiracy investigations. How about that? And if I'm wrong, if anybody tells me or proves me I'm wrong, I will come back on this very air and apologize and admit it. But I think there's a lot we need to know.
Look, I know that you're being entirely honest when you say that, John, because I know your character. And I also, when I last tuned into your show, you had said, look, you anticipated that there was going to be a massive amount of litigation about the 2024 election, as, there would be shenanigans repeated from the 2020 election. But you admitted that it didn't turn out that way, right?
And
so,
what did I do? I came back on last week, and I'm not being defensive. I'm agreeing with you. You are 100% right. I said I did not believe that we had a chance to get an honest, free, fair election, and that's my biggest concern about being able to elect Donald Trump. Jeff, our listeners, I was wrong. Thank God our prayers were answered. I think the work that people have done all over the country, like my neighbor right down the street here, he's in the real estate business. He spent half of his waking hours for the last 4 years working on election integrity. I think as a nation, we came together and we said, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to steal an election. And so I am ecstatic that I can come on the air and say I was wrong. There was no October surprise. There was election interference. I think it's happening in Pennsylvania right now in the U.S. Senate race. But the mammoth election interference and stealing that I was concerned about did not happen. And, one of the amazing things about Donald Trump, he will make these outlandish statements and you start laughing. That could never happen. And darn if you don't turn around and 6 months later it turns out to be true. And he said, make it too big to rig. That's what happened. He was right again. I'm John Gordon, substituting for John Fredericks. It has been an honor and a privilege to have Jeff Clark on the show today. I could sit here for the rest of the day and talk to you, Jeff. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for everything that you've done. I pray for you all the time. I literally pray for you, Jeff, as well as the other people who have been victims of a runaway government. I pray we save our country. I pray that you get justice in the end and your name back, and they better not take your law license. That's all I got to say, or else they're going to have hell to pay too. This is John Gordon. You're listening to the John Fredericks Show. Join us tomorrow at high noon for The Truth with John Gordon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.